is on the hunt at foxnews.com. Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan Hunt. President Obama says he takes, quote, full responsibility for a counterterrorism operation, a drone strike that inadvertently killed an American hostage and an Italian hostage. President Obama says he profoundly regrets the deaths of Warren Weinstein, the American, and Giovanni Loporto, the Italian. How did this happen? Should it have happened? How can this kind of inadvertent killing, in particular of American civilians, be avoided in the future? To try to answer those questions, I'm joined now by Colonel Cedric Leighton, retired of the U.S. Air Force and president currently of Cedric Leighton Associates, and David Weinberg, of the senior fellow with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. David, let me come to you first. Is this a natural and inevitable part of what President Obama sort of implied was the fog of war?
Yes, I actually do think that this is an inevitable outcome of waging a consistent, sustained war against terror. These were, particularly in the case of the American Dr. Warren Weinstein, Americans who had served in a battleground context. He had worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, when Americans are in harm's way in places like that, sometimes they're going to be taken hostage. What the United States doesn't do is something that our European allies, unfortunately, sometimes do pursue, which is to allow ransoms to be paid in order to get our citizens back. And because the United States has a no negotiation with terror stance, we don't do that. Unfortunately, that means sometimes our citizens are going to be held by terrorist organizations, and we're going to have to launch operations to rescue them when we have the intelligence to do so.
Colonel Leighton, if I could draw on your experience with air operations, President Obama, excuse me, said that there had been thousands of hours, hundreds or thousands of hours, in any case, a lot of reconnaissance, a lot of surveillance, and yet apparently we had no idea that these two hostages were in this particular location. How does that happen?
Well, I think, Jonathan, what has happened in this particular case is that as we observe what they call patterns of life, so do the terrorists, so does al-Qaeda. And in this particular case, what you're looking at is them being able to determine how we're doing our reconnaissance missions, and they were able to avoid, I believe, our detection mechanisms. So they brought those hostages to that particular location where they were then ultimately killed, and they were able to, in essence, keep them there because we did not detect that, and we were not able to determine any changes in the pattern of life of the local area that would have indicated that those hostages were in fact there. So there are weaknesses in our system, and every time that something like this happens, it points to the fact that we have to be very careful from what they call an operational security standpoint to make sure that the types of patterns that we exhibit don't become so obvious to the enemy.
David, the family of Dr. Warren Weinstein have already released a statement in which they expressed a disappointment at the efforts made by the U.S. government to win freedom for Warren Weinstein. Do you seem to imply, though, in your earlier comments, that we did this the right way and that we should not be paying any ransom or doing anything else in particular to get these hostages out?
Well, you know, any death of an American in a conflict zone is lamentable, is tragic, and we should do anything possible to try and prevent it. There are things that can be done better in the future, including boosting intelligence budgets so we can put more resources into trying to figure out where these people are in the future and to launch raids to rescue them. But frankly, there are limits on what we can achieve when, as the Colonel noted, these are wily adversaries that are going to do what they can to counteract us. And frankly, waging drone strikes is one of the most effective tactics that the United States can use in a war against terror. When drone strikes are used in a context that is sustainable legally, with congressional and military oversight, they allow America to be in more battlegrounds with more firepower against the terrorists than we otherwise could be.
And Colonel Leighton, obviously, as I mentioned before, We did get some al-Qaeda operatives in this, and another American was also killed, Adam Gadahn, who joined the ranks of al-Qaeda some years ago and was prominent in some of their propaganda videos. So in the end, the brief question, was this worth it?
I think the answer is yes, and as David correctly pointed out, there are going to be some significant casualties of war, and those include, unfortunately, civilians not only in the local area, but people who go and help the local population, such as Dr. Weinstein and his Italian counterpart. So this is, in the end, worth it. It is one of the most cost-effective, efficient ways to do this kind of thing, to actually go after an enemy like al-Qaeda. It has been incredibly effective over the years, and unfortunately incidents like this lead people to believe that it is not as effective as it really actually is, and that makes for a big difference in perception versus reality. And in this case, I think it is worth it because it is a better way to handle this type of target.
All right, we will no doubt learn a lot more about the details of the planning and execution of this operation in the days to come. Colonel Cedric Leighton, president of Cedric Leighton Associates, and David Weinberg, senior fellow with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, thank you both very much for your expertise. This has been On the Hunt at foxnews.com.